Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. DORA is here, how to ensure operational resilience and compliance. My name is Oana Ifrim. I'm lead editor at the Paypers, and I'm super excited to be here and to be the co-host of today's session together with our valued partner, Worldline. First, thank you all for joining us today. It's so wonderful to see so many of you here. Before we get going, I just want to cover off a few housekeeping items, please. So firstly, the session will take approximately 45 minutes. The session will be recorded and you'll receive access to the recording in a couple of days. You can also activate subtitles by clicking the CC button located in the top right-hand corner of the webinar room to the left side of the chat tab. You can choose from a range of different languages for the subtitles. There are options for English, Spanish, Italian, German, French, and Portuguese. Also, very importantly, there will be a chance to answer questions as we'll be holding an approximately 10 minutes Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So please feel free, don't be shy, to use the Q&A box to send in your question, and we'll answer as many as possible at the end of the discussion. So on the right side of the screen, you'll see a chat panel, which includes a chat room and a Q&A widget. So speaking of questions, let's kick things off with a question from us to you, the audience. We want to get a sense of how you see DORA from the start, so we can build on that as we go. We've got four very quick polls, and we're about to launch the first one. So let's see what you think. Thank you for sharing the first poll. Okay, so perception, how do you view DORA? Basically, how does DORA make you feel? Is it a regulatory burden, a compliance challenge with manageable effort, an opportunity to strengthen operational resilience, or an opportunity to improve the service to your clients? So let's give everyone a few moments to share their responses. So for anyone multitasking with 20 tabs open, now's the time to click back and vote. Okay, let's give it a few more seconds while everyone gets their votes in. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your responses. It is very, very, very important for our discussion. All right, thank you so much for taking the poll. This gives us a great starting point for today's discussion. We are keeping the results under wraps for now, but it's clear that people see DORA in all sorts of ways, and that's exactly why this discussion matters. So, what brings us together today? It's been almost a year since DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, officially came into effect, marking a major shift into how financial sectors approaches operational resilience. Many institutions are realizing that DORA is more than just another compliance requirement. It's a call to rethink how resilience is built into systems, operations, and partnerships. So what exactly is happening? The regulatory landscape is becoming overwhelming. Banks are flooded with compliance requirements, but does this pressure limit innovation, or can it actually inspire it? Also, DORA is not a one-time effort. Firms must continuously refine their resilience strategies, stay ready for regulatory updates, and remain proactive to meet current and future requirements. Also, we see that there's a growing reliance on third-party service providers and technology vendors expose financial organizations to greater risk and complexity. And also, we see escalating cyber risks, making DORA compliance more critical than ever, but also open an opportunity to innovate through smarter resilience by design approaches rather than simple box ticking. So that's why today's discussion is so timely. And to help us navigate this landscape, we're joined by two experts who will share their perspective on how organizations can move beyond compliance to truly embed resilience into their operation. So what they will do, they will provide practical insights on what works, what challenges remain, the investment needed for DORA compliance, very importantly, and how institutions can turn DORA into an opportunity for innovation rather than a burden. So today we're very fortunate to have two leading experts joining us to share their insights. And I'm very happy to introduce António Soares, Head of Business Development at Worldline, and Odun Fadahunsi, Senior Security Risk and Compliance Advisor at Google. So António and Odun, thank you for joining us today. It's so great to have you here with us, and we are so glad to have a conversation on such an important topic. Could you please tell us a bit more about yourself and your role, and very importantly, why this topic is so important to you? António, do you want to go first, please?
Sure. Thank you, Oana. Great to be here. Hi, Odun, as well. Always a pleasure.
As always.
And good morning, everyone. So I'm António Soares, as Oana mentioned, Head of Business Development at Worldline Financial Services. Worldline is providing critical payment infrastructure across Europe, and it does it in various ways. And as such, we are really under the perimeter of DORA under two main aspects. So we are a regulated payment institution. So we are directly regulated by resilience regulations. And we are also an ICT provider to banks. And as such, we have this dual view. And this is why it's so important that we actually have the experience of turning rule books, theory into action, because this is what we do on a daily basis. And it's great to be here with Odun, because Odun representing Google, a very valued partner of Worldline. And Google, as you know, it's a fundamental provider of resilient infrastructure across the world, and has a big presence in Europe. And they are one of the big players providing resilience to financial institutions. So I think this is why there's a big complementarity between what we do, and I think it's going to be a good discussion.
Thank you. Odun, you want to go next, please?
Yes, I'm Odun, and thank you. I'm excited to actually be part of joining Worldline and this conversation. This is not the first time we work together as partners in actually helping our customers, our joint customers in a sense, navigate the various security risk and compliance challenges they might be facing. So I'm Odun, like I said, I'm a senior security risk and compliance advisor from the office of the CISO in Google Cloud, and my role is to actually advise our customers and support them in their security risk and compliance journey as they're migrating to and operating in the cloud. And why is this topic actually important to me? My background prior to joining Google nearly 5 years ago, I spent more than 2 decades in banking, is to actually see how organizations can actually use risk management, compliance requirements to actually further the organization's business objectives, to help stakeholder values in a cost-effective and economical way. So I'm very excited to see this is happening, and I think at this critical junction I'm happy to be in the tech sector that is supporting organizations in actually achieving resilience.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, both. All right, let's start first with a bit of framing for today's discussion. But before we dive in, I'd like to launch our second poll. It will be super brief, I promise you that. So basically what we do, we'll use these polls to get to know our audience a little better and to make sure that the conversation stays as relevant and useful as possible for our audience, but they will also help us keep us ahead of what the industry needs, both in the content we create and in what we plan next. So compliance level, how would you rate your organization's current level of compliance with DORA? And we'll give you a short moment to respond. So please jump in and share your vote. Interesting responses coming in, keep them coming. And to our speakers, what do you think we're gonna see here? Think the audience will surprise us?
Yeah, I mean, I think there will be a mixed response. If I'm honest, I think there will be, because it depends a little bit on on the scale of the organization as well, and on the regions, on the countries. So I think there will be different stages. So I'm expecting a mixed response.
And I'll echo that as well. Based on working with various financial services, it's a different mix when it comes to how organizations view compliance. And it also depends on the stage at which the organization is in their compliance journey, based on past experiences, based on opportunities to actually automate and etc. So it'll be quite interesting to see what comes out in reality.
Okay. Let's just giving a few more seconds for the audience to share their vote. Thanks everyone for voting. This is this gives us a great starting point for the discussion today. Can we maybe check the results already? Okay. Well, that tells us a lot about where the industry is right now, and it really echoes what we've been seeing in recent research as well. Yeah. So, António, how would you interpret this in the context of what you're seeing with your partners?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some. I think this is probably what I was expecting. So a lot of the financial institutions are taking it very seriously. So you see that only 12% of respondents said yet to start. And we knew that from the beginning of the year, less than 10% were compliant, or they were announcing themselves to be compliant. I think I've seen recent surveys, and from speaking also with our clients, that maybe the compliance is getting near the 30%, 40%. Which is very good, because this is something that, some of the aspects of the regulation applies to small institutions which have less capacity to operationalize a lot of these activities, and so some of the aspects are also on a best effort basis for the smaller institutions, and so I think to get full coverage will take some time.
Thank you so much. All right, maybe let's just first thing first, António, since I have you here. Can you maybe walk us through DORA's, just very briefly, DORA's key requirements and obligations for financial institutions, and also maybe can you be specific on the implication maybe for the payments industry as well?
Sure. So I think there's a slide on that. Next one. Thank you. So the goal is to basically make the financial sector more resilient in case of disruptions. And we see disruptions coming from very different angles. But if you think about it, most of the disruptions come from complexity. So the world is more complex, infrastructures are more complex, interdependencies, payments are more complex as well. So the regulation came into effect on the 17th of January, 2025. We already mentioned that. And there's basically, in the scope of it, there's two main areas. There's the financial entities and the ICT providers for those financial entities. So you see there's from credit institutions, banks, payment institutions, and so on. And then what's interesting is that the ICT providers, like Worldline, for example, we are now directly under scope of DORA. And this is quite an interesting shift, because a lot of the DORA, let's say, spirit is one of transparency and accountability and responsibility. And I think the financial institutions are quite happy. Maybe they're not very happy having to comply with the whole rule book, which is quite complex and requires a lot of effort. But I think they're happy by the fact that the ICT providers are now under DORA scope as well, which means there is a bit of a shared responsibility here, and there's an expectation that the ICT providers will also follow the same rules and the same level of reporting and auditing and accountability. So I think that's good. And they see it from a positive angle from that perspective. But there's basically 5 pillars. So there's the 4 here mentioned, and there's one which is kind of overall and overarching, which is this duty of transparency and reporting. But starting by these four, so there's the risk management pillar, which is focused on two main areas. So providing operational resilience through redundancy, backup, security, recovery measures, and so on. But also there's a governance aspect, which is critical to this, which is to absolutely provide accountability to the top management of the organization. So this is a really big shift in paradigm, which is introduced by DORA. The second one is incident management and reporting. So it's really a focus on standardization of incident management and to really promote some transparency when incidents happens. There is a kind of a voluntary basis for security and cyber threats. But again, the more the community knows, the better it is for everybody, because everybody can then take action before the same incidents happens elsewhere. There's a lot of emphasis on testing, stress testing, extreme scenario testing, to make sure that things can be tested before the actual incidents happen. And then there's third-party risk management. And from everybody you speak to in the industry, this is where most of the effort is coming to, which is a bit unfortunate, because this is the bit that is procedural. There's a lot of contracts that need to be reviewed, but it's really providing the clarity of where your dependencies are. So, and like I said, the fifth pillar is really transversal, is information sharing. So it's all about having the regulators, the community, and all the stakeholders understand what's happening, understand how the ecosystem is being set up, and what are the alternatives that people have to become more resilient.
All right, thanks so much. So we focus on the scope and the obligations, but I would like to also move into the more practical side of things and maybe on the challenges, because when you say DORA, you say challenges as well, because there are challenges from what we also see here at the Paypers as well. Before that, I would like maybe to launch our third poll, and don't worry, we promise we won't turn this into a survey marathon, but we just want to get a better sense of your experience. So the challenges, what do you find most challenging about compliance with DORA? So please go ahead and cast your vote, and also please feel free to share in the chat if you've got thoughts beyond the poll questions, answers. Nice, I can see answers starting to come through. I think a discussion about challenges as well is very important as well. Odun, any guesses on how the audience will vote?
I think, based on my interactions with a number of my customers, I think people are probably going to see more challenges than opportunities. But what I've also seen from some more matured customers is you've almost got to turn the table upside down and not look at these from a challenges point of view. That's what I see smart moving organizations doing, trying to identify what opportunities are there to actually innovate, right? Rather than check the box exercise. But I'll be quite interested in seeing what those outcomes are. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Let's see.
I would agree with you, Odun. Yeah. I think if I have to guess, the burden of understanding the third-party mapping is going to be something at the top of mind. And I agree that I think organizations are looking how can they use this to better serve their clients. So I think the ones that use DORA as an enabler of better service, of going to the core of banking, which is trust, right? So DORA can really enhance the trust in the organizations, and banking is all about trust. So if you're thinking from a payment and banking perspective, DORA can be an enabler of their core value.
Yeah, indeed. Well, maybe can we maybe take a look at how the votes came in? That's interesting. Yeah. Looks like we've got a mix of experiences in the room.
quite interesting because I'm allocating resources and ensuring cross-functional coordination and as well as identifying critical business processes. I am not surprised in that context because from my experience in banking, when it comes to identifying critical business processes, sometimes it's based on whoever's voice is the loudest, right? If you speak to technology, right, they think their processes are the most critical. Trading, for example, if you speak to back office, but I think it's actually tying this back to what the business objectives of the organization is and looping that back. But the one that surprises me most is conducting resilient testing and managing incidents. I don't know what you think, Antonio. Does that surprise you, or that's what you're seeing from your end as well?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me too much because I think there's the kind of I'm not going to call it bureaucratic, but there's some admin that needs to take place immediately, which is this ICT mapping, and the resources is a big problem because financial institutions are really struggling a lot with compliance already. So this is not the first compliance initiative that they have to face. So I would imagine when a new regulation comes in, the first thing that comes to mind is how am I going to do this, right? With which people and so on. And this regulation really is a cross-functional impact, right? And it really must be on at the top level.
Yep.
I'm not surprised by that. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe organizations are leaving the testing to the last. I think I can see that from our experience as well.
And
Oana, you mentioned before, where does this touch payments and the challenges of payments? And I just would like to point out one thing, and I think Google knows this also well from outside of payments. But we, in payments, we always mention that we are a mission-critical industry, right? So we are, I mean, if you think of space, flights, and payments, those are things that cannot fail. And so DORA really is just harmonizing what we've been doing, right? In terms of backups, recovery, looking at the clock every second down is just unacceptable. That kind of situation is really a pressure in the industry that we've always had. So DORA is really just bringing it up in a harmony and in a standardized fashion to our industry.
So for us, so in addition to just what António said, so because where we see where Google states as a key technology partner to fintechs and banks, financial services industry in general, there's a different dimension. What I see with some of my customers is the biggest hurdle is actually not technical; it's cultural. Many organizations and the active participants in the resilience front to back processes, they understand what DORA. I mean, it's not the first time you're doing backup testing or doing disaster recovery testing. They understand what DORA is on paper, but actually, embedding a resilience-first mindset in daily operations across all teams is proving challenging because there's the theoretical part of it based on what is said to be done or what is expected, and then there's the actual implementation on paper. So that's one in terms of some of the challenges I'm seeing. And I think for some organizations, I think I mentioned that earlier on, some organizations, some of my clients are actually increasingly realizing that DORA is an opportunity to actually build a proactive resilience strategy rather than just another reactive box to give with regulatory body. One of the areas where I think a lot of organizations are finding challenging is the cost element, right? So you're now moving beyond annual penetration tests, right? Into comprehensive, almost regular digital operational resilience testing. And that's, for some organizations, is a significant investment and effectiveness, especially organizations that are not currently on the cloud infrastructure platform. I don't know, that's what I'm seeing, but like I said, some organizations are seeing the opportunities in it, and what I'd like to see is for organizations that see some of these challenges, we can turn the table upside down and say, how can I look at this and say, what are the opportunities where I could leverage organizations like Worldline, who are on cloud platforms, to actually modernize and create a more secure foundation that supports innovation and scaling.
Yeah, definitely excellent insights. I would also like to move maybe from theory to action at this point of our conversation, and basically to look at how to operationalize DORA and turn it into innovation and a catalyst for stronger defenses and smarter risk management. And I would like to start with an observation and something that we're also seeing in the market. And we see that a lot of banks tell us that they're completely flooded with compliance requirements, and DORA is just being the latest in a long list, because as we all know, they're juggling multiple regulatory priorities, and it can really feel like a burden. So I had a question for António. As one of Europe's leading payments providers, Worldline works with a wide range of banks and financial institutions. So you basically have a front row view of how they're handling DORA. From your perspective, António, do compliance and regulatory requirements actually limit a bank's capacity to innovate, or can DORA be an opportunity to build a more resilient systems?
So I mean, I think the immediate answer is yes, it can. It's a very heavy workload. This is how the financial institutions are looking at it. I think there's a part of it which is heavy duty, but it's necessary and it's important for the organization. And then the buzzword here is all about forget resilience, just focusing on redundancy, and really implement resilience by design. So this is the buzzword. But what does that mean, resilience by design? It's very beautiful to use these words, but concretely, this is thinking your business in a way that it becomes resilient by nature. For example, if you're a payment institution and you only accept one type of payment, you choose a card as a payment instrument, for example, and you select one card scheme, then if you're just doing that as the way to serve your clients, by nature, even if everything is super redundant, etc., but by nature of the design of the business, you're slightly less resilient than somebody that has two schemes, and you're less resilient than somebody that has three schemes, or somebody that has a mobile app which is completely disconnected from your plastic card. You see what I mean? So this is what we mean by resilience by design. This also applies to the infrastructure level, and I will let Odun provide examples there. There's also ideas to provide resilience by design. The industry is recommending a multi-cloud strategy, for example. It's recommending active setups instead of having an active and a passive, so that you have two sites that are operational. In some countries, for example, in France, there is even a very old tradition of having active-passive setups, or active even, where the two nodes or the backup is provided by a completely independent provider. So we are engaged in these kinds of projects with some banks, whereby we provide backup or vice versa to our competitors. Right? So this is really implementing resilience at a low level and making sure you're not dependent on a third party. You also need to think out of the box sometimes. You must implement offline use cases, because when some of these disruptions happen, you must still be able to pay. And you must mix a little bit of new technologies with some of the legacy technologies, which they are robust and they've been working for a long time. So sometimes that can be a fallback as well. So thinking out of the box is very important. And then there's the more, let's say, current topics like Gen AI or just AI in general, which can really help you predict incidents. So monitoring, using and forecasting using AI can be very important, and a real application of implementing technology to the design of your products and services. So that's what I would mention. And if we could bring up a slide now, I could maybe go a little bit more practical on the implementation aspect. So what do we typically recommend? And like I said before, we do this ourselves because we're also regulated by DORA. It really is a three-step approach. So the first step is to identify. You cannot fix what you don't know, right? So you really need to create the mapping of your critical functions. You need to understand what are the critical activities to your business.
I think we lost.
I think we lost António.
I think so. Yeah.
António, are you still?
I think it's a technical glitch.
Yeah. Let's see if we maybe there's some connection.
I can step in from an ICT provider standpoint.
Yes,
so
please.
Our process of getting compliance is similar to what António was discussing about. So the second step was to actually do a gap assessment. So from an ICT provider's point of view, for us as an ICT provider, it's new. I mean, the concept of we've always been resilient. If you think about your Gmail or your Google search, but there are some elements of that are peculiar to financial services that we have to take into consideration.
Step 3 is to monitor. So this is a live.
António, we actually lost you. We lost you for a while. So Odun stepped in for us.
Well, good, thank you. I think it was a VPN issue because or some security issue because I got a warning saying I was blocked. But anyway.
Yeah, Odun was sharing his insight at step 2.
Yeah, so I was saying it's similar, which is gap assessment to try and benchmark what our existing processes and controls were against the DORA regulatory citations and key requirements. I'll pass that back to you now.
No, that's fine. So, once you know where you are, you implement the measures, then of course, very important is the governance. So to stay on top of it, monitor, and this goes to the highest level in the organization. So this is a recurring activity that needs to continue to take place.
Thank you so much. And can you maybe, António, also share how Worldline supports DORA compliance? Can you share some insights on that as well?
Sure. I think, yep. So we see two main areas. So one is security. And we use trusted partners like Google, for example, for that. This is a very important part of the infrastructure offering. But also, we have many solutions that enable financial institutions to improve their security in the way they manage data. For example, we have solutions starting from the last one here on the left with protect the data. So encrypting data in transit or at rest, making sure that data is always safe and secure. We are one of the leading providers in Europe of fraud solutions. We use AI to make sure we have scoring of transactions, but also to understand, for example, how a user uses his mobile phone. So we can detect if this is a valid user or not just by the way the user interacts with the screen and the mobile phone. And then there's the other aspect, which is the more basic resilience aspect, where we can provide backups for what we consider to be the core or the heart of the payments engines. So we can provide backups for authorization engines. Authorization engines in payments are fundamental. They really are the heartbeat of the industry. So this is the ability to authorize when you go to a shop or when you want to do a transfer, that you have an immediate or instantaneous almost acknowledgement of your payment. So this is absolutely fundamental for the economy. Settlement as well of funds This is absolutely critical for the financial institutions. And then connectivity. So connectivity is absolutely fundamental. Like we said, lines must be always on, but there are always disruption. And again, this is where diversification of payment methods becomes very important. You know, the ability to go by a scheme A, scheme B, infrastructure A, infrastructure B is very important. And the ability to have all of this backed up. So having two connections to the schemes using different providers, all of this is very key. Fraud detection as well. I mean, these days, if you stay 10 minutes without a fraud detection in real time, you're really exposed to cyber attacks. Verification of payees, another example that should be backed up, because again, it's providing the security for transfers in the SEPA instant payments world. So mixture of security, backups can really improve resilience, and Worldline can provide those.
Thank you so much. Excellent insights, and thank you so much for sharing. And if I go to Odun, can you maybe share from your perspective how can financial institution turn DORA into the steps to turn it into a proactive resilience framework?
Right. So for me, first of all, I think I mentioned earlier on about the cultural shift, right? I would say stop treating DORA as a check the box exercise. Is a strategic framework for building better resilience and also creating business value. I want organizations to embrace the opportunity and view DORA as a mandate to modernize. You need to use the requirements like those comprehensive risk assessment, and you have the clear RTO, RPO targets. Use that to fundamentally strengthen your operations. In terms of the practical sense, and this is based on experience and what we've seen in some smart moving organizations. First of all, make resilience everyone's job, right? Not just IT's, right? So DORA actually requires a culture of operational resilience. And to achieve this, you need board to frontline accountability, right? It's the management body that actually holds ultimate accountability for the ICT risk framework, right? But resilience will then be pushed down to every level within the organization. Every employee needs to understand their role in maintaining continuity and security, right? So also, I think one of the symptoms I'm seeing from some of my customers is around training, right? Because there's always this concept that, or perception that, it's the DR or the BCP guys that hold resilience, right? So you need to actually have role-specific training that relates to different job profile that organizations or different folks or actors within that ecosystem are actually going through. So, for example, don't say your developers don't need security, don't need training. Train your developers when it comes to testing again as you're developing, testing against your RTO and RPO targets, right? Business teams also need to understand the impact tolerance of their processes and when to actually enact manual workarounds. So that's number one, making resilience everyone's job. Number two is testing, right? Now, I think António mentioned earlier on about the testing phase, right? But what we're seeing and what I would also recommend based on practical insight that I'm seeing from customers is turn testing to a learning event, right? We have this concept of fail fast at Google, right? So fail fast means you're learning faster mind. So you have to have the fail first, learn first mindset. So encourage teams to actually view testing failures, TLPT or DR drills, not as mistakes, right? But as invaluable insights into where the system is weak. How can we use this testing or lessons learned from these testings to actually improve and strengthen our processes moving forward? So that's the findings from your testing must directly feed back into your updated policies, processes, technology investment plans, and the retraining of your folks, right? Again, front to back. So what this does is to make that improvement continuous and proactive, right? And one of these things that we also have noticed, again, still talking about turning testing to learning event is if you have disruptions, right? Disruptions are actually amplified by poor communication. If you don't communicate promptly enough, that's not good, right? So your resilience drills that you do, and in partnership with folks like Worldline, you should include practicing what the required incident reporting process that an external comms strategy is going to be to ensure that transparent and timely information sharing happens. And lastly, rather than seeing DORA as just a one-time thing, integrate resilience into your daily operations. I think Oana, you mentioned earlier on, and then I think António also referenced it, resilience by design, right? Mm-hmm. So every new project, system, vendor onboarding includes DORA requirements. So what are your RTO or RPO targets? What are the contractual audit rights? At the very start of the design phase. It's far cheaper and more effective than to build resilience than to actually retrofit that later. So by embedding all these practices, what I see is, as organizations, you will respond to disruption more effectively because teams already have shared objectives, shared clarity on what their critical functions are, what they practice their workflows for recovery, and they have a pre-agreed communication plan. That saves you humongous time when if there is a live incident that you need to respond to.
Thank you so much. Strong points. And I would like to maybe go back to, because I think this is another key topic for our audience, the investment part. And we noticed that, allocating resources is a key challenge. And I want to see maybe to get a sense of effort and investment. And I would like to share our final poll, because I would like to see how how much is organization actually putting into DORA implementation right now. I think that's this is one of the great temperature check for where the industry really is. Thank you for sharing the final poll, and we'll give you all a few seconds to get your votes in and tell us where you stand. So while you're voting, please also take a moment to also think about any questions you might want to ask our panelists at the end. And while we wait, I would like to ask António, because implementing DORA isn't just about process changes, it requires investment in systems, teams, and technology as well. António, can you maybe share what this might look for different types of financial institutions like tier 1 banks versus smaller banks? Can you maybe share some insights here?
Sure. I think there's a difference. So it's, I think, well known that large organizations are spending considerable efforts on this. So tier 1 banks, especially, there's some estimates between 20 and 40 million euros annually or for the whole program. This is obviously substantial investments. There's already a sense that it eats into the IT budget. So probably 1 or 2% of the IT budgets are already allocated to this. And they do have the capability of doing it themselves, whether with some external support or whether themselves. And then there's the tier 2, tier 3s, the smaller organizations. And really here, as usual in the industry, they really need to rely on partners. And they really need to rely on shared knowledge. And what we see in our conversations with financial institutions is that the smaller they are, the less capacity they have to deal with this kind of information. They don't have so many people, and they rely more on providers like us, and I'm sure like Google, to implement. So I think there's a big difference between large organizations and smaller.
Thank you so much for sharing. Well, thank you for your votes. I am mindful of time, so we'll keeping the results under the wraps for now, because I would really like to get some questions from the audience, because we had a few questions that are coming, which we will try to answer. Okay, first one. Does a bank headquartered at, for instance, Singapore, but have branches in Europe, does this Singapore bank need to get ready for DORA? So who feels like answering this?
I can take it. I think it depends a little bit on what the branch is, how the branch is registered, but in principle, yes. So if they have financial activities and they are regulated by the European authorities, they will be under DORA. depending on the activities, they may have a shorter scope. But if they have a legal entity, fully regulated, and they're providing regulated services in Europe, then if it's just a branch, yes, they still need to comply with DORA.
Thanks so much. Would you like to? What's your perspective on this, Odun?
Yeah, I think I agree with António. It depends on the legal status of the European operations, because DORA primarily applies to financial entities that are authorized in the EU, right? So I think the European Commission confirmed that DORA doesn't apply to EU branches of credit institutions outside of the EU. But if the Singapore bank operates in the EU only through branches, the branches themselves are not directly subject to DORA regulation. But if the Singapore bank actually has established legal separate subsidiary, right, that is authorized in an EU member state, then that subsidiary is a financial entity with the scope of DORA and must comply.
Thank you. And here's another great one for the panelists. I think this one's for António. Could DORA requirements lead to new opportunities in payments innovation or service offerings for merchants and consumers? So this is more on the payment side of things.
Yeah, we're a strong believer in that. Like I mentioned before, introducing trust and diversity in the payments, I think that will improve the choice for the consumers. They will be happy to have more. It will also introduce some potential for differentiation to the banks and to merchants. And this is critical because this is providing innovation, providing choice to the consumer, at the same time introducing this concept of resilience by design, by diversity and choice. So we really think that this can be a catalyst for innovation, because you cannot innovate when you have a lot of incidents at the back and you have a lot of resources allocated to that.
Thank you. All right, and this is our last one, and a very interesting one. What role can AI play in making DORA compliance proactive rather than reactive? So you have one on AI as well. So who feels like tackling this question?
Let me give it a shot. Given Google's role as a leader in that industry or in that section, I think one of the key values that AI would bring is in its ability to manage overwhelming volume and complexity of data related to risk. I can imagine all those regulations, the DORA, the ECB, third-party outsourcing requirements, if the Singapore MAS, TRM, technology risk management guidelines, huge volume of compliance documentation, right? From a DORA standpoint, I think AI will enable the organization to actually anticipate, and I think António mentioned it earlier on, it's about prediction. It's about not even just that. So if I think about GenAI or large language models, right, you can use predictive risk assessment. So number one is you can use AI tools to analyze massive data sets. You can pinpoint, you can evaluate and forecast risk with precision, right? And really reveal some sort of any subtle patterns that manual processes might miss, right? Because DORA is not just only about, it is about resilience, but also security or cyber resilience as well. You can use AI-powered security platforms, to do behavioral analytics, to continuously monitor networks and cloud environments for any unusual or anomalous behavior. Right? That real-time visibility actually enables you to design what your your swift containment strategy would be like for emerging threats. And also, again, talking about the huge volume. There are some AI agents, the causal AI agent that you can use to analyze security data against the system topology tool. They can then use that to group anomalies, pinpoint what those root causes are, and automatically prioritize fixes based on their potential business impact. So the second point is that DORA actually mandates strict reporting timelines for reporting major ICT incidents. You can use AI you can configure AI to actually automatically detect, classify, categorize ICT incidents based on DORA specific criteria. I think António mentioned that specifically earlier on in terms of leveraging AI to actually automate and build some efficiencies into how you report incidents. And finally, if I think from our lawyer friends and compliance professionals, you can actually use AI to provide continuous oversight that goes beyond just the annual due diligence check. So what do I mean by that? So if I think about, again, using large language models, you can use the AI to automatically scan thousands, hundreds of thousands of vendor contracts and policies, identify clauses that are missing, outdated clauses, non-compliant. So you're benchmarking your contracts with DORA's required contractual provisions. And these actually, we were talking about innovation earlier on, and seeing the DORA requirement as actually to scale innovation. These actually drastically reduces the time and cost of contract remediation. And for some organizations as well, depending on the scale, I think António was referring to, if you're tier 1 versus a small organization earlier on, you can actually use AI to continuously monitor the compliance and risk profile, right, in real time. Define, analyze vendor data, flag potential issues of breaches, and then you can then turn this traditionally reactive process of vendor management into a dynamic and proactive one.
All right, thanks so much. And before wrapping up, I would like to maybe get each of you 20-second speech. So if there's one action everyone here should prioritize after this session, what would it be, António?
Identify the critical areas for your business and then take action on them.
Thank you. Strong one. And Odun?
I'm not sure I can top that. My one key takeaway for organizations is similar to that, or is in alignment with that. I would say, in addition to identifying those critical business functions, right, prioritize a full-scale cross-organizational stress for those critical business process functions against their defined RPO targets. And why is that? Because DORA is about demonstrable resilience. It's not just documentation. And a realistic test will actually expose weak links and then force your teams to proactive practice their response and move resilience from document to an embedded operational reality.
Thank you so much, António and Odun. And I think that brings us to the end of our session. First of all, a huge thank you to our speakers for sharing such actionable insights, and also to our audience for joining and for engaging so actively. Thank you for sharing your responses to the polls, for sharing the questions. So I think that if I can maybe share one key takeaway from today is that DORA is more than a requirement. It's a real opportunity to innovate and to strengthen resilience. And compliance isn't just a restriction, it can actually empower transformation and innovation. And we really hope you found the session valuable and you can start applying some of these ideas right away. And for those questions we didn't get to, what we'll do is we'll look at those questions and look to answer back to those who submitted them. Also, if you'd like to learn more about how Worldline can help, including examples of how Worldline itself approached DORA and how other clients have taken steps towards DORA compliance, please feel free to reach out to António. His email is in the slide. And lastly, a link to the webinar recording will be shared with you soon. So thank you everyone again, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye.